Hello and welcome to the end of day 18 of reporting Depp v. Heard. We have had the end of Amber Heard's cross-examination and we've had two depositions which were squeezed in at the end of the day, and we will debrief them in full on the park bench with, well, two people, one of whom looked like this at 3 o'clock in the morning. This is KB, a makeup artist who very kindly agreed to let us show her in her rollers at 3 o'clock this morning. She turned up in the queue like this, determined that she was going to look her absolute best when dawn broke and we were actually allowed into court. So my thanks to her for allowing me to use this photograph. She looks very, very glamorous when it gets to the park bench interview. She came along with her sister Sherry, and I asked them what they thought of being in court today, how it felt, what they learnt, and how it reflects on their wider thinking about this trial in general. And also what they thought of what was discussed, both the cross-examination of Amber Heard and the two depositions that are of Amber Heard's former friends that appeared at the end of the day. After that, I'm going to come back and say hello and introduce you to a remote park bench interview, but I will tell you more about that in a moment. First of all, let's hear what Sherry and KB had to say about their experience. So here we are, it's time for another park bench interview, and I have KB and Sherry who were in court today. Nice of you to wave at the camera, thank you. First of all, tell us how long you've been queuing up for, because you still both look amazing.
Thank you.
Despite how long you must have been queuing. I mean, what was it like? How long have you been awake?
Well, I haven't slept in 2 days, but exactly. But
Because of this?
No, not really, because I work a lot. I was here since 8:30.
8:30 last night?
Last night. But there were people here previous and since like the day before that.
Oh my God. And your sisters, is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
So did you come together?
No, she actually fought for a spot for me, which I landed number 87, and I got in.
Wow.
So, but I didn't get here till 12:30ish.
Is this your first day in court, day 17?
It was my first day, but my second time here. But this is her second.
This is my second time.
Okay, so when did you first come then?
The first time was Johnny's last day of
All right, when it was much
cross-examination.
easier
It
to get into
was.
court, even when Johnny Depp
It
was giving
was.
evidence, the word had not spread in the same way, had it?
No, I actually got here at 4 a.m. and I was number 50. So,
Just 4 a.m.
Yeah.
No, I
So
mean,
it
in
wasn't
those
too
days, there were
bad.
some people who could turn up after 7 o'clock and get into the main court, and
I know.
it's completely changed now, hasn't it?
It was bonkers last night.
So tell me, what did you think of Amber Heard's cross-examination today?
I thought it was fantastic.
Go on, pick out what you remember from it, because this is the thing, when it comes to the end of a long day, you've
Yeah.
absorbed so much information,
Yeah.
you've got to try and parse what the thing was that really stood out for you, that you really remembered.
The cross-examination from, the Johnny's side, they did a fantastic job, like trying to block everything, and for all the questions, they blocked it rapidly. It was so fast, and it just let Amber's lawyers all like flustered, and that was, to me, was very fascinating to watch the whole dance and the tango between them.
Amber's lawyer seems to have difficulties learning how to switch her microphone on, which you would have thought she'd got used to by now. It was even starting to irritate me, and you could
Yeah.
tell the judge was getting a bit
Yeah.
antsy. You know, if you want to talk to me, I have to press the microphone on. She wasn't quite like that, but you got that vibe.
No. I think she got flustered too.
Okay, well,
Judge was-
let me try and set you off on something then. The thing that stuck out for me was the cross-examination over the Washington Post article, in which Camille Vasquez, who was Johnny Depp's lawyer, very clearly and effectively linked that article with Johnny Depp. There is
Yes.
now, I know the ACLU
Absolutely.
did that earlier,
Absolutely.
but Amber Heard essentially admitted that chunks of that article were definitely about the domestic violence she suffered at the hands of Johnny Depp, which I think is one of the defences to her libel claim. I know she's also defending it on the basis of truth, but that to me was, I think, a really important part of that cross-examination, because it goes to one of the key points of this defamation case. Anything that struck you, Sherry?
And Camille Vasquez was really effective in pinpointing that she did use the word publish in the tweet, and that it wasn't a retweet. It was an actual original tweet where she linked to the publication. So I think that really underpinned what Amber was saying, that she didn't know, it wasn't really about Johnny. She didn't really publish it. So that was a really good thing that she pinpointed, Camille Vasquez. Another thing that was really interesting to me was the going over the love stories in the journal, because you can see Amber's multiple personalities just in her handwriting.
Okay.
Because there were so many different ways that she wrote things that you can kind of see she was all over the place. So that was interesting.
Can
and
I
it
just
was
plug
a lot
my
of,
Twitter feed for a moment?
Yeah.
I put those journal entries on my Twitter feed. So if you go to @NickWallace and look through the tweet thread from today in court, you will see those multiple journal entries. Thank you very much for that. You know, that was really
Yeah.
interesting. So yes, she does. And one of the things that really struck me was the difference between what she said in court about what has happened or allegedly happened to her, and then the recordings that we were played, because they were obviously played to contrast with what they knew she would be saying in court. I mean, and some of those recordings, they're very difficult to listen to, aren't they? I mean, the one where she's taunting and laughing at him, you know, in particular, which she admitted was showing, you know, a cruel and ugly side of her. but it's again, it's one of those things that people keep coming back to, that the image that she's presenting in court contrasts on some occasions with the recordings that we've got as well. But you picked that as well out of the journals. You know,
Yes,
okay.
yes. And what also was interesting to me is that she focused so much on the fact that everything happened since the TRO. And what Ms. Vasquez did, what that was really effective, was that she explained that, you know, everything that was done with the TRO was done when Johnny was out of town.
Yes.
And although Amber didn't want to say that she knew that he was out of town, taking the photographs of her injuries with her friend at the courthouse that they, you know, displayed, doing multiple lighting shots so that the injuries looked different, based on different lighting. I think all of that really went against what she was trying to say about the legitimacy of the TRO.
I think in her defence, I have to say she was probably acting on advice, but
Yeah.
maybe that didn't come up to that.
possible.
That didn't come up to us. Although she did say that a lot of the things that happened were not her anything to directly do with her. So one must assume that she was acting on advice. I
Right.
haven't asked this because I've now got to the point where I'm assuming it that you are Johnny Depp supporters.
You know, when I initially came into this, I mean, obviously we do love Johnny Depp. We love Johnny Depp movies, but I didn't come into this with a idea that we knew for sure that Johnny wasn't at fault or that this was going to be a successful defamation claim. I'm actually an attorney, and I look and I try to find faults with both sides of the case. I think just over time, the evidence has been just supporting more Johnny's side of things, and
is this
that's
because you've been looking at the evidence as presented on social media and in the media? Because what we see outside of court, of course, the jury are not going
They
to
cannot
see.
say anything.
Yeah, and
Right.
there are, as we have seen with this system, there are huge fights over what can be
Right.
admitted into evidence.
Right.
So
Right.
there is an assumption, I think, certainly from what I'm reading in social media, that Johnny Depp is going to win this. Is there that kind of feeling? Because I don't know whether that's a dangerous assumption.
It depends on the jury too, because the majority of the jury are men, so you would think they might side with Johnny because he's a man, but they have to know how to read the evidence and understand the terminology. So if they don't look at the evidence the right way or don't read the evidence that is presented to them, then anybody's game in there. You know what I mean? For example, what Amber was talking about yesterday about the makeup, about
On the cuts on her wrists.
Yes. So she was doing the color correction thing. I'm a makeup artist, okay? Like if you have a bruise like this, it's pink. You don't do color correction. Sorry, I fell down 5 steps, so that's why I got the bruise. It's okay. It happens to me all the time. So if you, so you have a bruise like this, it's pink, right? So she was explaining that you do color correction and you put blue in here to cover, to change the color to fix it.
For me, who knows nothing about makeup, I was thinking this sounds very knowledgeable. She
Yeah.
sounds like she knows how to cover up bruises.
So she was saying it as she was trying to sound like an expert because she's doing it to herself, right? So if you have a pink there, you put color correction on. But what she was saying that she does it over her makeup. But the thing is, you don't do color correction before you do your foundation. You do color correction so that way you will hide the imperfections imperfection that you have or the bruises that you have, then you put your foundation on, then you concealer, then you powder it to set it, and then you would have that perfect look. If you're just doing color correction, you're going around, you're gonna have this green looking thing on it, or even over your foundation. You know what I mean?
So you thought this was an example of her
Yeah, for
not telling the truth.
Yeah, I mean, and you could create bruises. I mean, I create bruises all the time in makeup. You know, you could create bruises and take a picture of it and say, this is what I have it in different angles, and you could show it in different lights. And
But if she's lying, why didn't she do that more?
that's why I want to wonder why, if she is hurt and she's bleeding and she has bruises or there's rings of Johnny hitting her in the face, why there's no pictures, there's no evidence of them.
Oh, you know what also came out today that we did not know was going to come up was the alleged altercation between Amber and her ex-wife. And that she had allegedly assaulted her, and she, was vehemently denying it. But I didn't hear an objection from Amber's attorneys, and I was kind of surprised by that. I was also surprised when her counsel was not reframing questions that we're not getting through on objection. So
there are a couple of interesting things that did come up, and I want to bring up one in a moment. But the Tasha Van Ray thing, that came up right at the end of the cross-examination, and Amber Heard said, "Well, it just didn't happen. It was made up. It was a planted story." And then it ended, and then re-examination started, and Amber Heard's counsel came in and said, "And did she put out a statement about this?" And she said, "Yes." She said it was completely untrue, and it was a really sort of weird vignette because there was another moment about Aquaman. Aquaman was introduced on a tape recording, and then there's this big thing that I've seen a couple of times. In fact, I've had people say, "Oh, don't you know that Johnny Depp got her the role in Aquaman?" So the issue of Aquaman came up. She was asked if Johnny Depp got her the role in Aquaman. She said, "No, I got myself the role in Aquaman."
She said, "Excuse me."
Yeah, she was very riled by that. She was like, "Excuse me?" She said, "Did Johnny Depp get you the role in Aquaman? Didn't he?" And she said, "No, I got it through auditioning." Then it was left. That was it. It wasn't touched. It wasn't like there was a big aha, gotcha.
Right.
Here's Johnny Depp's letter begging her to go into Aquaman.
She didn't
that
get
was really weird because
people
some
back.
And then Elaine Brederhoff came in and said, "Let's talk about Johnny Depp and your role in Aquaman. How did you get your role in Aquaman?" She said, "I worked really, really hard for it." But we didn't know where this was going. So
what's the point of it?
You're an attorney. Tell me, what is the point of bringing up things like this? Is it so that they can come in the closing arguments? Are they going to be sort of put into a jigsaw by the end of the trial?
Absolutely. So at the end of everything during closing argument, what they're going to do is compile an explanation for the jury of everything that we've seen, everything that's been entered into evidence, not the stuff that was objected to, right? And they're going to come up with a strategy to convince the jury that they've met their burden of proof, compiling everything all together and considering all these things. What I especially found fascinating today is that the two supporting witnesses via deposition video for Amber both don't talk to her anymore.
Exactly.
Right, no, yes, right, we need to move on. So
interesting.
surprisingly, right at the very end of the day, we had the end of cross-examination and re-examination of Amber Heard, which I'm quite surprised about because I thought it would have lasted possibly even into the next day.
I was too.
And we had two video depositions from two of Amber's former friends. We had, we've got someone, hello, you okay?
Sorry, I dropped my... I didn't go in your bag, I just dropped it.
That's right, I just wondered what you were doing just in case
No, I didn't want to interrupt.
It's fine, we can jump cut, it's fine.
Do that.
So yeah, one of the things that really surprised me about today is that we got to the end of the cross-examination, there was a reasonably quick redirect, and then suddenly we were into two of Amber's former friends who did video depositions. So we had Tillett-Wright and then we had Raquel Pennington. Now we've heard a lot about both of them, particularly Rocky Pennington, as she's otherwise known, throughout this trial. Tell me what you made of their depositions. Io went first, didn't he?
Io, I think, was not good for Johnny.
No, he wasn't.
He was not good for Johnny.
Why do you say that?
Because him and Johnny shared a lot of interests and secrets with each other, and he just reverberated everything that Johnny has told him, and he brought a lot of secrets that Johnny would not tell other people if he didn't care about that person. So I don't know half of the things are true or not that he came out with, and I don't know him personally, so I don't know what kind of person he is.
He was a very credible witness in the
very
UK trial
credible.
as well.
So
He does seem very credible.
Then it would look really bad for Johnny. And I was watching Johnny's reaction too, and he didn't seem like he was comfortable with what's being shared out there.
But he also said he'd never seen Johnny be violent towards Amber Heard,
Right.
etc.,
Yeah, he
etc.
didn't say
Right.
that either.
Take me through Rocky Pennington's evidence in the deposition.
She really couldn't remember very much. And a lot of the times when they were having discussion, when they were asking her questions about events and sequences of events, they would go back to, well, was someone on mushrooms? Just to like kind of make it a cloudy memory as opposed to this like clear vision of what happened. And there was an incident that she testified about where Johnny had been relatively verbally aggressive towards a friend that he thought that Amber was too close to. But then at the end of it,
Wasn't it? Hicksville,
at the end of it, it really came down to don't get too close to my girl, and it really didn't come off too aggressive. I don't think she was too terrible for him.
No, it's the allegations of what happened in the trailer park afterwards that is what come out of this trial, which are quite shocking.
And I think that's where they finished because she was explaining how the trailer park looked like. It looked like a mess, and that's where they left it off. So we're going to find out, I guess, tomorrow about what happened in there. And she said something about a lamp, and that's what she saw specifically, but everything else was like a mayhem of
that had been
Oh, so
ripped out of the
it was-
wall or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
So summing up what we've seen today and your experience of this trial, because you say you came to this with an open mind, presumably
same
you came as well. I mean, what we've seen over the course of the last 5 weeks now, 6 weeks, is how this trial has grown massively in the news media. Lots of people are talking about it. Back in the UK, people are talking about it. Have you been able to come to any settled conclusion as to what's going on?
I think Johnny wanted for his truth to come out, for people to know that he's not the monster that everybody thought of him when Amber came out with her version of the truth.
I mean, from what I.O. Tillett-Wright was saying today, though, it sounds like there are two Johnny
Well, two,
Depps.
yeah.
There's the sober
There's
Johnny
just-
Depp and there's the arsehole when he's drunk.
I mean, believe me, there's different sides of us as well, and I believe if somebody venomous or somebody horrible or somebody that is not right fit in our life come in our life and is going to make us a bad version of us will come out, if it pushed.
Yeah.
If you're pushed, I'm going to push back,
But I suppose the point, the whole
Common
crucial point of that is
truth
whether that person then becomes violent towards their spouse.
I don't know. We've never been in that situation, so we don't know how we're going to react. And I don't know if Johnny is a violent person without drinking. He doesn't seem like a violent person drinking. We've never been around him when he drinks, so we don't know how he acts in there. But I don't think he is that kind of person, even if he's assaulting.
And you think that trial has proved that?
Yeah, I think that would be it.
I think that was not an unpopular opinion. What's your opinion?
I think that if you hear him on video, it's clear, at least from the evidence that's been presented and that's in evidence, that he wasn't the aggressor. A lot of the times it was Amber, be careful, dealing with a woman scorn type of thing. She wanted the attention and she didn't want him to leave when she was having these arguments and he didn't know how to deal with it. I think he wasn't a perfect person, but I think the publication painted him out to be somebody who was a sexually violent person, and I just don't think that's true. And even if he's not successful because of the high standard for defamation claims for public figures, I don't think it matters to him. And I don't think she has the $50 million to pay him, even if he did win. So I don't really think that at the end of the day, that's why he did this. He wanted the recordings that he took to come out, and so that people can hear what he had to deal with.
And is there anything at the back of your mind, because it's always the thing that's playing around at the back of my mind, what if she's telling the truth? This woman was found to be credible by a British judge who's presumably seen a few witnesses in his time.
Right.
She's now had to go through this multiple times. Is she brought this on herself?
Well, I can tell you, judges, you make mistakes. And it could have been, that the evidence just came in a different way and you had a different result. But I don't know. I mean, if she is telling the truth, then, it's a sad day that we just all assume that because he's Johnny Depp that he didn't do anything wrong. but I don't necessarily think that you get the same results in different countries, because there's different standards of evidence, there's different standards of proof.
So if the jury
That's it.
over here decide that he fails in his defamation case, does that mean that you will think that Johnny Depp is a wife beater?
No.
Even if he's lost on two sides of the Atlantic?
No, because
Which is what this trial has done, hasn't
Yeah,
it? Because
yeah.
so much evidence has come out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the defamation for a public figure is such a high standard that it really doesn't matter ultimately. I think he just wanted to cleanse his image for the public and for his kids.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Because that says a great deal about the justice system on both sides of the Atlantic. If he fails on both sides of the Atlantic and is rehabilitated in public opinion, what does that say about our court system? Miss Attorney, A.
I have a question for
Don't
you.
kill the messenger.
What's UK's opinion? People in UK, what are their opinion about this?
That's a really, really good question, because obviously I haven't been back to the UK since this trial has started. I know it's big news. We obviously tend to defer to the courts in our own country more readily than we would in a foreign country.
Right.
So the overall feeling, well, you are entitled to call Johnny Depp a wife beater without fear of legal reprisal in the UK. If he wins this case, I don't think you'll be able to do it in the US. And I think the lawyers in the UK will tread very carefully over anyone who does suggest that he is. So, but I don't actually know whether public opinion is swinging behind Johnny Depp. Certainly I'm told amongst younger people, because they're watching all the TikTok and the social media stuff, that the younger people's public opinion is swinging behind Johnny Depp. But that's just anecdotal, because as I say, I haven't been back there myself. That's a really interesting question. I don't know. And it'll be interesting. I don't know whether I'm going to be back in the UK before the verdict comes through. So it'll be interesting to see, if I am back in the UK, how it changes with the verdict. No, I mean, this whole thing is fascinating, isn't it? All, you know, aside from the rights and the wrongs of who was in the right and who was in the wrong, everything else that is going swirling around this is
It was worth the adult sleepover.
Yeah, it was interesting.
She says, rubbing her eyes.
But to me, it seemed like she was more of the needy or like trying to hold on to Johnny than he was. Because she's painting him as the one who is holding on to her and being the jealous type and not the stalker, how is it? Controlling. But in the videos and the recording, you know, sounds like she's the one who is asking him, begging him to stay and don't do this. It's more of the wants to hold on to Johnny as much as possible. So I don't.
We'll see what the jury thinks.
Well, let's see what the jury thinks and what more evidence comes out over the next 1.5 weeks. We've got 1.5 weeks left of this.
More evidence.
There's going to be more evidence.
I need more.
Jerry, KB, thank you so much for coming in and doing a park bench interview. I really appreciate it. And thanks for bringing such lovely colour to the bench as well.
Thank you.
Very great.
Appreciate it.
So there you go, that was KB and Sherry. Weren't they delightful? My thanks to them. I booked them in over lunchtime and they stuck around well after court had finished to record that interview, so I am very grateful to them and I hope you liked that interview. So now I'm going to introduce you to an English chap called Phil Mitchell. He works with male victims of domestic violence. He's got a book coming out later this year. He's taken an interest, as have many people, in the domestic violence world and in the legal world in this trial. And he had one or two things to say about the Depp v. Heard case itself and the wider issues that it raises. So I hope you enjoy this, a remote park bench interview with Phil Mitchell. Phil, thank you so much for doing this interview. First of all, just tell me how you got into doing what you do.
Oh gosh, that's a big question. So I was bullied very badly in school, quite emotionally, violently, all of that sort of stuff, and that prompted certain people around me at the time to refer me to the school counsellor. I liked that sort of support. I thought, I'm going to look into this when I'm older. I did. And that is one of the, I won't say the only, but that's one of the main reasons that I became a therapist. And through that work and through finding out other things and looking at other issues that were going on in the world, I ended up working with boys and men who have been or are at risk of being sexually abused, exploited, some abused as children, some abused as adults, some sadly as both. So the predominant focus of my work has generally always been to work with boys and men who've been or are assessed as being at risk of being sexually abused in some way. I experienced my own sexual abuse, sexual exploitation at 16, which I didn't realise was abuse until I was in my sort of mid to late 20s. And sadly, I experienced rape at the age of 20. And those experiences also contributed towards me wanting to work with boys and men. And when I worked in the voluntary sector for about 8 or 9 years, I realised through that boys and men were absolutely getting a raw deal, without a doubt. Now, I'm not saying girls and women have got it easy and that they're sorted, not at all. What I did see in my role was that we were seeing girls who were assessed as being at risk of being sexually exploited, and they were referred for support and assessments took place. And at the same time, my team and I were seeing boys in sometimes exactly the same situations as the girls, but they weren't being referred. Sexual abuse and exploitation was not considered. Many times it was drugs, crime, being groomed for criminal exploitation, youth offending. And what we saw was the girls were being victimized, the boys were being criminalized. Years and years later, fast forward 10, 15 years later, I think it's got a lot worse, in my opinion. And I think it's certainly for boys and men, there's not a month that goes by where you don't see a headline somewhere where somebody say men are the problem, boys are the problem, time to talk to boys. And I think what we are doing is we are magnifying the harm that they perpetrate whilst minimizing the harm that they experience.
And from making that point publicly, have you encountered hostility to that?
Yeah. I'll be honest. Sometimes I've told my hands up. I'm not perfect. I have perhaps made that point not in the most eloquent way. Sometimes my emotions have got the better of me and I've had to apologize for things, and quite rightly so. I like to think I learned from my mistakes. But even when I have made that point in a way that I consider to be fair and rational, yes, I've had a lot of hate. What month are we in now? May. So February to March, I had about 2 or 3 death threats from people who, anonymous accounts, sending me things via my email. Please kill yourself. Please drink bleach and don't ever wake up. Women have got it worse than men. You need to man up and deal with it. Do us all a favour, just kill yourself. The world would be better off without you. One very strongly worded, but yeah. But again, it's what happens, and I think there is a belief by some that what happens is it's one group of people who are not wanting to accept and acknowledge that other groups of people also suffer and experience harm.
And you see this has got worse in your experience in recent years.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So for example, in 2009, the government at the time had I can't remember the exact title of it, but it was something like the government's guidance, supplementary information to supporting sexually exploited children and young people. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it did do a okay job, in my opinion, of tackling and highlighting the sexual abuse and exploitation of boys and young men, why they don't disclose, issues around that. Fast forward 10 years later, the current government guidance and documents that address sexual abuse and exploitation do nowhere near as detailed job, or a job that's as robust as it once was when it comes to tackling and addressing the sexual abuse and exploitation of men, boys and young men rather. If anything, it focuses much more on how they perpetrate harm and a lot less on how they actually experience harm.
It is fascinating because the discourse in certainly in mainstream culture in the UK is very much men are the aggressors, women are the victims. And yet, when you look at the sort of hard facts, and hard facts are clearly debatable, as I've learned in this country whilst I've been over in America, but the number of women who kill men is nowhere near as high as the number of men who kill women. And there are people who say, well, look, this is a clear signal that men are the problem.
However, you could also say to that, the number of men risking their lives on a daily basis to save those in need, men and women, are a lot higher than the number of women risking their lives on a daily basis to save.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean
Well,
by
I
that?
think what I'm saying is that what some people do is we look at, right, well, if we look at the data, certain types of data, we know, as you've just said, that men are killing more than women are killing. Yep, from, so for example, Office of National Statistics, yep, that's true. But what people do is they use that to say, well, this is just what men are like. This is what men are like. Well, is it? Because if you look at population data and then you look at the number of men killing, it's less than a fraction of a percentage. And I'm not really sure it makes any logical sense to be judging men as a demographic based on what a fraction of a percentage of them do. It would, in my view, make much more sense to think, okay, well, what are most of them doing? Let's have a look at the good they are doing. And again, you just have to pick up a newspaper, look at the online articles, and what we see is that men are, every single day, maybe not every single day, that's a bit much to say, but on a regular basis, men are risking their lives to save those in need. The recent example of the young man that saw a toddler hanging out of the window, I can't remember where it was. What did he do? He ran there, he risked his life, and he saved that child. Yeah. And I think what we do is men are more likely to run and help than run and harm. And that's the problem we kind of need to really address.
What I don't understand is how this became a culture war, because the women's rights movement and the desire to protect women from harm comes from a good place. It comes from a desire for equality and a desire to stop harm. What you are doing is exactly the same. You are trying to stop harm and you are trying to do a good thing. How have we ended up in a situation where this has turned into some kind of raging culture war?
Well, your point where you said that the women's movement, it's come from a place of wanting to stop harm. I think for some,
the women's movement has come from a desire for equality, but the women's movement in terms of protecting abused women comes from a desire to stop women from being abused.
Yes, absolutely. I think there are certain, but I guess if we think of the women's movement, it's a bit like the men's movement. There are subgroups within the movement.
Of course.
And I think, sadly, in my experience now, and I can only kind of talk about my experience and maybe some of the other people I'm working with, that there is, in my experience, a very loud, aggressive group within the women's movement where they are saying, we want fairness, we want equality, we don't want to be treated like this. Absolutely, not a problem with that. It all makes absolute sense. However, it's often done, or sometimes done, in a way which is all, let's hate men, men are the problem. And it's quite interesting because you think, well, hang on a minute, what we're doing is we're taking the men as a demographic and we are hurling hate, abuse, misandry, various, vicious comments at them. And what the message perhaps could be translated as or interpreted as is, men, you're scum, you're horrible, you're vile, you are awful to us and you're abusive monsters. Oh, and at the same time, help us and do more for us and work with us. But it just doesn't seem like it's a logical request. Yes, there are abusive and violent men out there. There are abusive and violent women out there. But I think it's what we often see is that it's all men. The hashtag kill all men was trending a while ago on Twitter every single day. I mean, I find it every single day. There are.
One thing I've learned is that social media is a blooming cesspool anyway. So I try to ignore hashtags and things like that. But I can appreciate how it might harm some vulnerable people who are younger and do spend a lot of time on social media. I want to, if I may, because we've only got a limited amount of time, direct you towards Depp v. Heard, because this is the reason we're talking. I was put in contact with you by someone who said, that you're interviewing lots of people, you need to speak to Phil. I don't know what interest you've taken in the case, but I'd like to get your view on it and what implications you think it might have, whatever the verdict when it eventually arrives.
Well, it's very controversial, and I don't think we can say otherwise. Everyone's got different views and everyone's got strong opinions. One of the reasons I was kind of vocal about this at the start was I heard the recording where Amber Heard was criticising Johnny Depp for walking away.
Yeah, I was listening to it last night.
Yeah. And I mean, there's been that many recordings and things. You know, you might have to forgive me. I might not be able to remember everything. But when I was listening to that recording, she wasn't, to the best of my ability, if I can remember rightly, saying, I get angry and upset because you hit me, you punch me, you abuse me, you physically harm me. I didn't hear any of that. What I was hearing was her saying, I get scared because you walk away. I get scared because you don't care enough to stay and fight. Now, when your average man, if there is such a thing, but, you know, just go by science for a bit, when the average man gets angry, he often feels this need to move, to act, to move his body. And you know, the levels of testosterone in the body, along with adrenaline and all of that. So from a science point of view, men will feel this anger, they'll feel it in their body, and they will feel this need to act. Some will feel the need to hit something, kick something, destroy something. Now, what we often hear are people going, isn't that really bad? No, not necessarily. It depends on what they're hitting, kicking, or destroying. Yeah. So I mean, there are a few all over the country, raid rooms that were set up. So raid rooms, you would pay 10, 20, 30 quid. You would have half an hour in a room. You'd have some goggles on. You'd have a sledgehammer and you would smash up all TVs, microwaves and things like that. Some would say, isn't that terrible? It's encouraging violence. Well, I would say it's actually encouraging people to channel and express their violence in a way that is okay. They're not harming anyone. They're not breaking the law. They're not hurting themselves. And so when a man is, or when anyone, in fact, is saying, I'm too angry, my emotions are getting a little bit extreme, they're getting the better of me, I need to walk away from this. We need to let them walk away. What we need to be saying is, do you know what? Good for you. You're taking control of that situation. You've acknowledged that your emotions, whatever they are getting the better of you. The emotions getting high. The logic is getting low. So what do? You walk away. You walk away, and what you do is you find a way to express that anger. You might rant and rave. You might go into your spare room and punch a punch bag. You might go for a pint with your mate down the pub and sort of express your anger. When you've done that, the anger goes down a little bit, and that means the logic can come back up. When there's a little less emotion and more logic, that means you are in a better position to try and resolve the argument, to understand what was going on, to have a discussion about what was that about, how do we make sure that doesn't happen again, let's think about it. You can't resolve an argument when you've got that much emotion and that much logic. Simply put, doesn't it make sense to think, you know, problems and issues that need resolving are more likely to be resolved effectively when you've got more logic rather than less of it? And what Johnny was doing, from what I heard, was he was walking away going, it just gets too much, and that's when we have to walk away. I'm like, yeah, and he should be praised for that. He should be, yeah, absolutely, yeah, walk away. From what I heard, Amber Heard was angry with him for walking away.
And do you make the distinction between walking away from an argument, which I think most people would say has merits, if not all? No, most people, let's stick to most people, and committing acts of violence, because if you commit an act of violence around someone, that can both be intimidating and terrifying, even if they are not the object of that violence.
Absolutely. And that's why it's about, you need to let them walk away. So there are men that I have worked with over the years, and again, I've got permission to share this anonymously, but there've been men that I've been worked with over the years they've kind of got very angry. They've gone from 0 to 10, as they often say, in the blink of an eye, and they start clenching their fists. They move around and they go, you know, their brain is going, right, you don't need to talk now, so you're struggling to talk. You're moving your hands because your brain is going, come on, hit something, kick something, because you're getting angry. And when they say to their partners, or the ones that do say to their partners, I need to walk away from this, sometimes their partners go, no, you are not going to walk away. And some will literally stand in the door and prevent them. Well, what do we want the man? Do we really expect the man to go from 0 to 10 women and then back to 10 to 0? He's there and he's angry. And what is contributing towards his anger is the partner and the partner's behavior, the partner's comments, the partner's attitude. So if he stays there and the partner is the fuel on the fire, if you like, the anger's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And then what will happen is you might get some men that struggle to control their anger, and they'll, for example, pick a plate and smash it on the floor.
I tell you what you're saying, and I'm sorry to cut in, but okay, we have a limited amount of time. Do you therefore think that Johnny Depp is a victim in this relationship? Because
yes.
it does it follow, and if so, why?
Well, first of all, it's the blunt reality, and this is where it gets controversial. We don't necessarily always live in a world. So every instance of domestic abuse, it's not one person is 100% a victim and one person is 100% a perpetrator. That is, there's research out there that says sometimes person A initiates the violence, sometimes person B initiates the violence, sometimes person A initiates other types of abuse, sometimes person B initiates those types of abuse. So, it's not as perfect as some like to say, but I think from what I have heard and from what I have seen, I think it is more than reasonable to say that Johnny Depp is absolutely a victim of domestic abuse. We have heard from her very.
And can he be a perpetrator at the same time within that relationship?
Well, I mean, again, we've got to be careful of the labels and things that we're using. Yes, some would say that, if two people in a relationship, one person can initiate violence, the other person can initiate violence. Well, how do you decide who is or isn't a perpetrator? How do you decide who is or isn't a victim? It is possible to be saying to say that two people in a relationship who both perpetrate violence against each other can perhaps both be labeled a perpetrator and a victim. Okay. In the Johnny Depp case, I want to be very careful what I say, as I said earlier, but I certainly think that based on the information that I have seen and heard, that it is absolutely reasonable to say that regardless of whether all parties are perpetrators and victims, Johnny Depp is definitely a victim. He has said so himself. We've heard the tapes, we've seen what he has said, and we've heard his partner saying, I start physical fights. I can't promise what we haven't heard, to the best of my knowledge, Johnny Depp saying, yes, I have started physical fights. What we've heard him saying is, I need to walk away. I need to walk away. That's what
we have heard evidence of her in court talking about graphic beatings and sexual violence, and there is a tape where she says to Johnny, I thought you were going to kill me on accident, because of whatever she supposed was going or said was going on, and it's a bit of a mess, really, isn't it? And I'm not entirely sure that a court case is the best way of resolving it, but one of the things that has come out of this is this huge public interest in it, and at the moment, the way the online sphere is working, it appears to have turned into something of a kind of witch hunt. Let's burn the witch, let's drown her, she's lying, she's trying to destroy Johnny, she's a fantasist. How helpful or unhelpful is that?
I guess it depends on who you ask. I think that, generally speaking, I think it's reasonable to say it's overall not very helpful. However, there might be some people out there who believe it is very helpful, who think, this does help me to rant and rave and vent. And, there'll be lots of people out there who will resonate with various people involved in this case. And for some, they could say, well, it helps me to vent because I can resonate with this person. Overall, I'm not, I don't know how helpful it is at all. I guess it's how do we measure something being helpful? How do we measure something being unhelpful? I think, and you're talking to someone here who predominantly works with male victims. So I think for male victims, to some degree, the fact that this has been on TV and we've seen and heard certain things, it has helped them. When I think on the day that I'm getting my dates mixed up, so you might have to bear with me, but on one of the days, and I think it was when he actually ended his own testimony, and he said that he is a victim of domestic abuse. Within one day, I received 3 phone calls from men who had referenced the Johnny Depp case.
That's
and
amazing.
Said they wanted to book some sessions, and that's just amazing. Me. I'm just one person, and that's 3 guys in one day. And the one of them explicitly said, and I said to one of them, Kate, I says, you're the 3rd person who's phoned me today, and he said it's because of Johnny Depp. It's all because of the Johnny Depp stuff.
How interesting. Have you ever dealt with anyone who's been falsely accused of violence? What's that experience like?
It depends on what it. So when we talk about,
because that must be really complicated to unpick.
It's interesting because for me, I'm a therapist. So when someone sits down in front of me and says, Phil, I was raped, I was sexually abused as a child, I was an adult, I will work with them and I'll explore that with them, and I'll ask them what they want to get out of their sessions with me and how it's affected them. And it's exactly the same when someone sits in front of me and say, I was falsely accused. I think sometimes there are comments that suggest, how do you know they're telling you the truth? It's not my job as a therapist to automatically think everybody who sits in front of me, no matter what they bring, is lying. I can't do that. I'm not a police officer. I'm not part of the law.
Well, it came up in the trial that a therapist's job is to believe what they are being told, unless there are quite obvious contradictions in what's being said.
Absolutely.
Or indications to the contrary, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's right. You know, from a police point of view, in an investigation court legal point of view, it's of course, there's different things, you know, there's evidence and all of that sort of stuff. But I think, you know, what often happens is the issues of people being abused, it's given a lot of attention, quite rightly so. You know, boys, girls, men and women, there's all sorts of abuse that they experience, and it's absolutely right that is highlighted and addressed and explored. Sadly, I don't think that we address false allegations in a similar way. And if we think about it, false allegations are simply another form of abuse. But they're not always seen as such. And I think sometimes they are often kind of highlighted as an acceptable casualty of you know, dealing with abuse. And I don't agree with that at all. You know, and I often tweet very regularly saying, you know, abuse can and often does have devastating effects. False allegations can and do have devastating effects. And what we often hear, I think the last statistic, and there's so many statistics being thrown about, but the last statistic I heard a week or so ago was that 3% of reported rapes are false.
Yes, that was actually quoted to me by Dr. Charlotte Proudman, who I interviewed on this channel.
Well, okay. I mean, I'm not sure the background of the 3%, so I want to be careful.
No, likewise, yeah. But I took that at face value. Yeah.
But if we say that's true, if we say, and again, it's like, is the 3% suspected? Is it proven? So all the wording and everything really matters.
And what is that? Is that 300 people? Is that 3,000 people?
Well, I can tell you. So the year ending December 2021, according to the Office of National Statistics, there were just over 67,000 reported rapes, and that's rapes of men and women. Okay, if we are saying 3% of those are known, proven to be false, that's about 1,805, 1,807. That's people who've been falsely accused of rape. And if we're saying that of those 1,805, they are individual people, well, rape in this country, according to the Sexual Offences Act, can only legally be perpetrated by a man. So that's 1,807 men falsely accused of rape. That is not okay. And how can we be okay with that? It doesn't mean that by saying that, we're then saying every single person who alleges rape, they're making it up. They're not. Of course they're not. Okay. Many will be absolutely going through a horrific trauma. They want and deserve help and deserve support. Absolutely. And so do those where they've been falsely accused. Yeah. And I think that's the thing. We have a lot more support and sympathy for victims of abuse than we do for those who've been falsely accused of abuse.
Phil, it's been a fascinating conversation. I'm deeply grateful to you, and I'm learning a lot throughout this process. I'm questioning a lot of my own assumptions, and I'm finding discussions like this really, really helpful. And I don't know what your perspective on where you think this trial is going to go or what effects it might have, but I think you gave an inkling of it when you said that as a result of the trial, you had 3 people come forward to you referencing the fact that they may have been motivated to speak to you, whereas they might not have done had they not seen what was going on in Virginia. Yeah, absolutely. And I do know that another colleague of mine also had a man phone him saying it was all because, you know, the Johnny Depp case had made him think about what he went through and so on. So, you know, again, that's anecdotal, but I'm pretty sure I can't be the only practitioner in the country where they are noticing an increase in men saying, actually, I think I need to address this, I think. And so it can only be a good thing. It can only be a good thing that people are listening to what Johnny Depp is saying, hearing what he is saying, and thinking,
I want to talk to someone about this. Maybe the stuff I need to deal with, and if it helps.
Unless he's lying, of course, which is the
Well, that is, yes, but I think that's the thing. Do we know? We don't know, and it's a case of, is he lying? Is he not lying? I'm not in his head. But what I am allowed is I'm allowed an opinion, and we're all allowed an opinion. And based on what I have seen and heard so far, I don't believe he is lying. And if there is absolutely, I can never say the word, but if there's absolutely hard evidence that shows he is lying, then absolutely I'll go, oh my God, he's lying, and wow, he's played us and he's done well. But I'm not seeing any of that so far at all. I think.
But you think therefore that she is.
I think from what I've seen and from what I've heard, I think there is a very good chance that she is lying, and that some of it is exaggerated. I think, again, that's my opinion. That's what I think from what I've seen and heard. There are going to be those that say, oh, right, so what are women meant to do? Are women, not meant to come forward? Are they not meant to discuss? No, absolutely. They should come forward. We want them to come forward. Abuse that they suffer needs to be dealt with. I think in this particular case, and taking into account all of the circumstances and the specifics relating to it, I know many others, struggle to believe that she is telling the truth. And if it turns out, again, that there is absolutely irrefutable hard evidence, then we'll go from there. But so far, yes, we've heard that she has said, I have started physical fights, I have hit you. There's lots of comments that she's made that say, well, that's what you've said. She's also said comments that you've done this to me, you've done this to me, you've done this to me. Okay. Well, the thing is, when you are in this country, when you are accusing someone of something like that from a legal point of view, well, it's just logical that the word of someone alone, from a legal point of view, cannot be enough to find someone guilty. There has to be other evidence. And, that's the fair due process of this country. Sadly, that does sometimes mean that people who are abused have the trauma, if you like, of then having to come to terms with the fact that their perpetrator may not face consequences because there isn't enough evidence. It's a very complex and controversial issue.
My thanks to Phil for doing that interview with me. My thanks also to Sherry and KB before him for appearing on the real park bench outside Fairfax County Court. It is time for the end of this episode of Reporting Depp v Heard. If you would like to support what I do journalistically, then please do go to reportingdeppvheard.net/newsletter. I've got a website called reportingdeppvheard.net, which hosts the podcast and the YouTube. And it also hosts a newsletter. If you are kind enough to make a small donation, or a large donation if you want, but any donation from the drop-down menu, you will be signed up to a newsletter for the duration of the remainder of this trial, and probably all the way to the verdict as well. And I would be very, very grateful for your support. So reportingdeppvheard.net/newsletter, and I'll be back with another one of these in around 24 hours time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.